Coming up in this episode.
Why do we have so much trauma? Why do we have all these difficult childhoods? None of that is an accident. Everything here is by design because that's the fault. Lush, right? If everything is just so random, then why aren't we living a great life? Clearly, there is somebody that benefits from us constantly living in a low vibrational state.
You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Rafidi and Yerasimos.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Here for the Truth podcast. My name is Yerasimos. I have my co-host, dear friend, brother, Joel Rafidi with me here today. And our guest today is Ola Wolny. I think I pronounced that correctly. And we have a really enlivening conversation here, exploring a bunch of different subjects, things that she's gotten into over the last, several years and even part of her life. She has an interesting story that you'll hear all about. But we get into various subjects related to the nature of our world. What is this place? What is Earth? Feminine alchemy we dive into as well. What can bring a person closer to health? We all definitely had our views on this. And so, we engaged passionately. So we look forward to hearing what you have to say about it and your thoughts on the episode. And as always, wherever you're listening, please like, subscribe on whatever platform, because that really supports us in getting the word out and people becoming more aware of the podcast that we have. So thank you all again. Thanks for being here with us. Thanks for being here for the truth and willing to navigate a lot of different conversations, whether you agree with the things that we talk about or you don't agree. I think this is the work that we're doing, is to be able to hold it and dance with it and continue on in this life. Enjoy the episode.
Ola Wolny is a woman who walks the path of old feminine wisdom and alchemy. Deeply rooted in her cultural background and the teachings she has encountered throughout her life, she doesn't consider herself a seeker or a researcher, terms she sees as overly left-brained and ultimately misleading. Through her work, Ola invites others into a collapsed field, a void where false narratives, illusions, and the architecture of the matrix dissolve. She exposes these constructs and helps to erode their grip on our perception. She's also a storyteller, a voice for forgotten history still alive in folklore, mythology, indigenous accounts, and ancient texts. For the past 8 years, Ola has lived in the Arctic, where it was the spirit of the land itself that guided and initiated her, revealing deep mysteries that she later found echoed in ancient texts and forbidden doctrines. Ola, thank you so much for being here for the truth.
Thank you so much for having me. My pleasure. Looking forward to this tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a pleasure to have you here and to host you, definitely. One way we always like to begin these conversations with first-time guests is we want to dive deep into your personal journey, your personal hero story. What was kind of the trajectory of things that led to you, I guess, coming into the understanding and the interests that you have today?
Oh, wow. I'm afraid that it's not going to be probably immensely interesting. I don't really have that spectacular journey to take you on. I think that which is maybe in a way promising, because you see, I'm not gonna give an account of, I've been like this forever and it's so special. No, I actually was very much brainwashed into the matrix pretty much since I was a child. I think it's almost like I had two worlds kind of walking together. One that was a little bit sort of on the edge, looking across the veil, but the other was very much rooted in this sort of false construct. And I mean, school education, kind of brainwashing about prestige, status. I come from Eastern Europe, so I don't know if you guys are aware, but I am a child of the early 80s, so we carry a lot of the sort of inferiority complex, I would say, as a sort of generation, as the whole population. So we get very much programmed into success, prestige, status, becoming something, making something out of yourself. So that was pretty much my focus in, I would say, probably the first half of my life. with education, very heavy education and sort of a very strong pressure, because my mom was actually the teacher at the school that I was attending. So, I had to be top notch at everything, and I couldn't sneeze without the whole school knowing. So, it's wasn't great. But it kind of pushes you even more to be very much, I would say, immersed into the system, not in a fun way. So I would say that, somehow I managed to sort of get out of that construct. I don't even know how and why I feel to this day that in a way I was ripped out of it. I was kicked out of it. I don't think I should sort of be grateful to myself so much, because I think that, given my journey, I came here 8 years ago. That was part of my oil and gas path at the time, because I worked in oil and gas for many, many years. And it was just a progression to my career, to come here. And here it's pretty much where I got kicked out of that whole world. And I say kicked out because this is pretty much how it happened. So I just kind of had no choice, but at some point embrace a totally different path, and it wasn't sort of out of lack of choice, that I started walking this, but it was literally coming here was like a catalyst for me to be able to come out of the closet, if you know what I mean, on that other stuff, on that kind of more esoteric stuff, because of course when you are, I was trained in engineering, and I was working very much in the operations, very much kind of, grounded, left brain, and very much kind of logical, analytical aspects that were praised and rewarded and sought. And here I am suddenly, pulling out of all that and stepping into totally different type of inquiry and spiritual aspects. And I would say not really in a new agey way, but in a kind of very much indigenous way, in a sense, because being here exposed me to very authentic, grounded, rooted in deep tradition of this land and this geography, history, traditions, culture, new information, certain aspects that I started later putting together. And this is pretty much how my journey kind of happened. And then, of course, I think the last 5 years have been pretty significant for all of us. So that would have probably pushed me, to the next level, where I feel like perhaps I was kind of truly pushed and felt perhaps called to stop being silent. So to kind of come out of hiding and start sharing some of it with people. So this is pretty much what happened.
Yeah. For those that don't know, you're living in the north of Norway right now, in the Arctic Circle, right?
That's right.
Right. So what inspired that move? And also, what was it that led you to be inspired to research esotericism, alchemy, Gnosticism, things like that?
Well, you see, so my background is oil and gas, with even very early days in telecoms, but very much sort of engineering, that kind of left brain side. I have master's degree in this stuff, from the UK. I used to work in the UK, and that was the beginning of my oil and gas. And after several years, I got transferred to Norway, to the south of Norway. And I spent another sort of 5-6 years down there. And within that time, you guys might have not remembered, but sort of 2012, 2014, 2016, that was this whole oil and gas collapse at the time. So a lot of, at least in Europe, so a lot of companies were going through restructuring, etc. And at the time, my job was going back to the UK. So I kind of had a choice. Either I'm going back or I'm moving forward. So I've decided at that point, I had been living in Norway for 5 years, so I didn't really want to go back. And I just decided to look for other opportunities. And as it happened at the time, opportunity presented itself here up north, where I am right now. So I moved up here for oil and gas job. It was in that context. It had nothing to do with any of the esoteric pursuits at the time. I was already, I would say, flirting, with that space through my personal aspects, but also through just being purely kind of drawn to certain things. But it was definitely not navigating my experience at the time. And so that's why I'm saying I feel like I've been lured up here, you know, in a sort of funny way. So and because and the reason I'm saying that it's really peculiar is because pretty much everything collapsed the minute I set foot up here. So my whole oil and gas context just dismantled as I came here. My job, you know, that kind of didn't work out exactly the way I thought it would. And it sent me on a journey of, you know, who am I if not my job title? Who am I if not that role that I was serving and that I was known for? Because I was actually quite lucky to be able to make it a little bit up. Well, that's what I thought, right? The pyramid structure, you want to climb the ladder. That's what we are taught and trained and programmed to do. So that's what I was doing at the time, and I called it success until a point when I realized that it doesn't matter anything, right? It's a matrix thing. So that's how that happened. That this is how I found myself here, and it was at that very moment when I got kicked out, in a sense, by the circumstances, by situation, out of the whole oil and gas matrix kind of career, etc. A construct. I very much had almost no choice but to, you know, I had to rebuild myself because my whole identity was pretty much built around that job and, you know, that career and all that. This is why I mentioned this context of coming from Eastern Europe. This is what we're trained for, you know, because we are rooted in this inferiority complex. Perhaps not so much now, but like I say, you know, I was born in 1982. That was the time when we had martial law in Poland. So all that kind of communistic context, you know, we were a little bit behind the curtain, behind the veil there. So we had to very much, I think, fight our demons in a way, that kind of system programming from just the geography context. And so yeah, it was a lot of things to face when I found myself in that situation here. And that sent me on that kind of more esoteric journey. And you see, you read my bio, which might perhaps sound a little bit too mystical to some, or kind of borderline a little bit too much. But you see, I don't think I have ever had such a authentic experience with something so real in that spiritual context as I've had here. Here up north, here in Norway, because you see, there's no spiritual circles here. There's no kind of new age here per se. Everything that I'm talking about is literally living in people here. It's living in the land. There are also indigenous people, or the kind of the people of the north, the Sami people. And this is not just Norway; it's also Sweden and Finland and a little bit of Russia. So there is a lot of beautiful teachings in their culture that I've been also exposed to over time. And that's you know, my own personal experience, and the path that I kind of had to take to even regain myself again, you know, find myself again. That was the platform for me to reconnect with these teachings and to get a lot of I don't want to even say it inspiration. I think it was a tower moment. It was a collapse, you know, of the false structures. And in that environment, I probably, the engineer still worked in the background. I needed answers, you know. I like things to make sense. I'm not about the fluff. I'm about the, you know, show me the real deal. So this is the journey I've been on, and because probably I am so still to a degree, you know, structure driven, system driven in a sense, how the architecture, I needed to understand things. So this is where astrology came in. This is where numerology came in. So I think I kind of there was a lot of bad door in there, but I know very well from the beginning that I felt there's something off about the whole astrology, numerology. As in, it shouldn't be like that. I don't want mathematics to decide for me and my fate. Something's off. So it was this whole unraveling. It was path of a lot of unraveling, dismantling, collapsing. A lot of the times, my own discoveries would have been later shattered. And here I am now, kind of at every gate you take off some clothes, right? Which is precisely the journey that I often refer to, the journey to the underworld.
Amazing. God, there's so much in there I want to kind of pull out and talk about. Well, two things that popped into my head. One is I love hearing you talk about how the people up there just live, quote unquote, spiritually, live these values. Because in our world, especially I live in the Los Angeles area, and then, we see the rise of New Ageism. I've found personally the people that I consider the most centered and the most present and the most connected are the ones that are surrounded by nature and they have an intimate relationship to nature. They're not sitting there going to moon circles every month. And I just love that you said that, because I just feel like we've lost that to some degree, the deep connection to wisdom from the past. Because people just lived it,
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to get into, and we'll see where this conversation goes, but engineering is pretty much a male-dominated world. Is that correct? To some degree, or no?
I would say, I probably, because I have been in that environment in oil and gas, I've seen women and men, especially in Norway, because Norway is very sort of equal in many aspects. So I have seen a lot of women in this engineering field, operational field, but I see where you're coming from, and I would absolutely agree that it's probably quite a male dominated and probably quite masculine, in a sense of how you process things. I'm not saying that women are not capable of that, but I do agree that it's a lot of analysis, kind of logical aspects, which I think women are perfect as, but it's not the kind of natural choice, probably. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Hope you're enjoying this episode. If you're down to dive deeper and engage in personal, passionate conversations, explore new topics, up-level your life, meet an awesome community, find opportunities to share your creative vision, your creative work, and just be more authentic and share more parts of yourself, then I'm really proud of the space that we've cultivated in our membership community, Friends of the Truth. For a limited time, it's only $17 per month, or it's actually $12 per month if you join on an annual membership. That will be capped at a certain amount of members. So you can head to hereforthetruth.com/FOTT. And by joining, you get 5 live calls a month. And honestly, the most awesome Telegram community that's out there.
Okay, cool. I was just curious, how that impacts your work now and those experiences there, the pros and cons of that. And you can get into it later if you want, but those were things that just popped into my head.
No, and I think, to be honest with you, I think it's quite funny that I have that background, because I know that it's not the most usual background. I think you find a lot of fluff in this field, right? Well, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. When women show up, there's a lot of not that much substance always, right? And I think that the background kind of makes me cut through the nonsense, which is what I did. I'm known for that. Literally, I struggled in England, because I would be too direct for their liking, so I had to adopt a little bit. But I think that the engineering approach, right now, and for the past several years, it allowed me to be able to understand and explain pretty complex, perhaps, things in a language that's quite clear and understandable. So that's my major takeaway. And I think I find it difficult to take off that engineering lens, and I don't think I should be always necessarily taking it off, because I think that in the current world, people are very much about understanding things, there's too much nonsense out there. So things need to make sense to a degree. So I think there is a lot of value in being able to actually explain and sort of break things down into the atoms,
Cool.
even further.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess let's kind of dive a little bit into the crux of things here. You obviously have, quite a unique and unusual take on the system of astrology, its purpose, its reason for existence. So where do we kind of start unpicking your perspective on astrology?
That's a good point. And I think it's it's very important that I do explain the
Totally.
sort of reason behind it, because as you've noticed, astrology in the mainstream understanding or concept is used as a tool of growth, and it's kind of hijacked in a sense that there's plenty of people that have no idea what astrology truly is about. And I'm not talking about the interpretations within astrology. That's another level. Yeah, that's another level. We're not going to be even going into that because that's irrelevant right now. But what astrology represents, that's the issue, because astrology is considered quite a benevolent tool or perhaps concept in a sense that there is an evolutionary aspect to it, that this is the way we can grow. And I think the whole concept around it is not only false, but it's dangerous. So you see, I would say that probably astrology, numerology would be one of those things that I was into since I was a child. And that's absolutely that goes back a long way. But I would of course study it from all sorts of different angles. But I always felt that there is something inherently wrong about the idea that you can collapse someone's life, someone's future, into a mathematical function, because that's effectively what we're talking about, right? I mean, this is a language of symbols. Mathematics is language of symbols. So the fact that you can somehow track in a mathematical way with precision someone's choices, someone's experiences, someone's traumas, someone's future. So where is it written? And if it's written, even if it's written, and if you can trace it, why isn't it positive? Why is it not only positive? So the presence of the negative aspects within our experience was that, I would say, the sort of the launch pad for me to be able to dive deeper into something's not right. And when you marry that with studying the ancient texts, especially through the Gnosticism, Hermetic texts, but anything, the Bible itself, right? There's abundance of texts. The Mesopotamian, the Sumerian texts, the mythology, for example, the Norse mythology, beautiful, abundant in content that precisely explains what we are dealing with, and it is not a benevolent force. So mythologies, and they are consistent across the board, across geographies, are referring to a certain construct above us, created by forces that are absolutely not looking out for our greatest good, quite parasitic forces. So echoing the messages of David Icke here, but not only, plenty of people talk about it out there. A construct in which our emotional states, our energy is being harvested. And there is literally a construct that is very, very advanced technologically, that has been put up above us, whereby, this is where this whole notion of firmament comes from. Firmament is just a part of it, right? It's just a part of that whole construct, because the construct, as it happens, how does it work? I don't exactly know. The technology is very advanced, but we do know that it kind of places a lens on the energy of constellations, the whole constellations up in the air, up in the sky, or however that really looks. the planets or whatever they really are, but there is some kind of lens applied which filters the energy and it sends it across to us as the receivers, as the kind of ones that are being targeted for this energy harvesting in a certain way, which unfortunately dictates our experience here. And that, the mechanics of that can be interpreted using astrology, numerology, and many other systems, which probably effectively are still rooted back in astrology, numerology. There are systems based on the tarot, for example, but they are falling back on the numerology of the date of birth, etc., or the name. So there is a code. Literally, it's a little bit like a computer, right? There's a way to communicate with a computer. You can ask, you can send commands, and it answers. It gives you answers. But because there's a system in place, there's a code, there is a mathematical representation of something that's being done here. And because these parasitic beings that are behind creating this architecture happen to be very much dependent on technology, very advanced technology, of course, they are using codes. So, of course, there's going to be an element of sort of mathematical coding in it. That's probably would be the way into astrology from my side, from my way.
How did you get to the conclusion that like there is a firmament? You know, how do you know? I've never been up there.
Sure.
You know, that's my only question there.
Yeah. Well, you know, the firmament, the presence of firmament is described in every cosmology of every culture. I'm not just talking the ancient texts. I'm talking the ancient cultures. I'm talking the Maya, the Inca. I'm talking the cultures in India. I'm talking Navajo people, right? The Hopi, for example. All of them, in their cosmology, in their mythology, in their legends, refer to a structure above us. So that the whole cosmology, as they explain, and then you find that across the board, you find that here in the Norse mythology, you find the same sort of notion repeated, right? In the Bible, for example, the way the world was created, the firmament is mentioned there, but that's not the only place, right? You go to Egypt and you see the goddess Nut, right? Nut, extended as the sky, that's the firmament. You see that through the ancient texts, you see that very, very strongly. It's literally it's named in the Gnostic text. It's named in Pistis Sophia, for example. Pistis Sophia, the Gnostic text Pistis Sophia, explains the exact architecture above us. So it's not only the firmament, but it also explains the zodiac mechanisms. It kind of explains the levels and how that works. How is that all organized? So you know, as I always say, when you know what you're looking for and you kind of know how to interpret these texts, and mind you, we're not looking for some heavy symbology. We're not looking for a language that is very sort of convoluted. No, not at all. It's pretty much, I would say, the same level of clarity as you get in the Bible.
Is there any information in these texts that say how this was created? And also what is this place? Because, you know, in today's world, we have so much back and forth on what the shape of the earth is, which I tend to agree with you. I've heard you say this before. I personally don't care about the specifics of it. I think it's a curious investigation, and people are free to go down that. But like, how was something like this created?
Yeah.
And what was here before?
Right. So I think that we have to sort of distinguish two aspects here. First of all, the creation of this place, as it is referred to in a lot of texts, such as the Bible, does not actually refer to the original creation of this place. The Bible and a lot of mythologies refer to creation. Remember that the ancient texts, a lot of scriptures, they've been tampered with. They've been tampered with to reflect the accepted history by those that want to write that history, right? So the history is written by the winners, not by the losers. So we know a pretty biased version, right? As in you almost need to know to be able to read those texts so that you know what you're navigating through. So we are dealing with two different, I would say, sort of contexts here. One is referring to creation, but that's not a creation. This is referring to an event where these parasites, these beings, impose their structure here, and they called it creation of the world. This is precisely what's described in the Bible, for example. This is what's described in the Gnostic texts. In for example, Pistis Sophia describes the whole structure. This is not the original structure of this realm, or this is not what was here before. And then we have this other aspect. What was it before? How did this happen? And the Sumerian tablets, which is of course the translation of these tablets, is one of the biggest challenge in history, and sort of trying to decipher what really happened. But the galactic stories talk about this place being created, being kind of very special. This was one of the last landings after the galactic wars. As in, when we look up in the sky and we see different constellations, they are not named because they really have these shapes. They are named because they're trying to tell a story, and they're trying to tell a story of what happened before. So for example, the fact that we have one constellation sort of being invaded, and that's being represented in mythology. The story is that we, as in the Earth, was created as the sort of final solace or escape place following these galactic wars. And so the beings that came here and in the end created the firmament and these structures, they have been fighting these galactic wars up there and everywhere else earlier. So you might be thinking, do I think there are planets and all that? You know what? I don't think we have the capacity perhaps to perceive or understand what is in there. What I absolutely do believe is that you need a portal to enter reality here. And then you don't just take a spaceship and you land here from somewhere. No, I know that there are portals. For example, if you really want to dig into why there were wars in Iraq, why there is always conflict around Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, right? That area, why there is always an issue there. Why Saddam Hussein, right? What were they trying to do, and why they were truly invaded by Americans? Get nothing to do, even with oil, had nothing to do with terrorism, nothing of that kind. That was just a cover-up story. But what's really underneath they had access to certain technology. They had access to portals. They had access to portals, which were the way in and out of this realm, of this reality. So how do you travel across? Well, you don't just take a spaceship and you just go, how they show us on sci-fi movies. You kind of need an entry and exit point. So and perhaps it is above us in a way, but it is not, as in you take a journey for hundreds of years. No. So again, we're kind of dealing with two different contexts here, and how to say this? I would say that the best thing to know to understand what happened here. Look to Avatar, the first Avatar movie. It's not a sci-fi movie. It's a documentary. Of course, they flipped the roles, right? So we have the humans attacking the blue people. But if you really want to know what this place was, this is why we have the petrified trees. Why do we have giant petrified trees? Because they've been cut down. Why do we have, a place that clearly shows remnants of totally different civilizations that was here, and here we are picking up the pieces, right? So
Okay,
yeah.
let's kind of, I guess, double click on a few points here. Who are these parasitic beings, and why did they come and, I guess, shift and transform and create this construct that you're claiming we now live in, I guess?
And are they trapped here too?
Are they
Also,
trapped here?
yeah, are they trapped here as well? I'm curious.
So again, a few things to unpack. Who are they? Well, they are. There's a hierarchy to them, right? We're not dealing with one sort of set of beings. We're dealing with different types of beings. According to the Sumerian tablets, we are dealing with intruders from the Draco constellation. So the Dracos, the reptilians, in that language, that's what we call them. What do we call them in different geographies? Well, we could call them gods. In different geographies, in different mythologies, we call them gods, but these are the same beings. So whether we call them the gods of the Norse mythology, right? That's the same beings. Because think about it, in every mythology, we kind of have two fractions that are usually fighting each other. So in the Norse mythology, we have the gods and we have the giants, the Jotun. In the Hindu, we have the gods and we have the demons, we have the asuras. In Sumerian mythology or in Sumerian history, right, we have the Anunnaki, but we have the males, we have the Anu, Enlil, Marduk, and we have Tiamat, fighting Tiamat. So there are those two sort of forces always fighting. And also when you travel to Egypt or to any of the sites, you start seeing the physicality of them, right? Those statues are still there. They are much bigger than us. Not all of them are literally physically looking like the reptilians that we can imagine, but because there are different races, there are different types that were involved there. Sumerian tablets describe that. So they were the ones, they were the aggressors once upon a time who started the galactic wars. And the point behind it, according to the old alchemical teachings, was that the males in those races at some point decided to separate, or that was the result, separation from their females, because they wanted to pursue that path of domination, hegemony, sort of aggression. They wanted to start creating their own worlds. And the females, when they saw that, they said, no, we're not going to participate in that. This is against life. Females always are standing on the side of life. This is against life. We're not going to participate in that. So because males do not have the ability to create, right? Woman is the one who births. Woman is the one who materializes things into reality. A concept once upon a time very well understood, but these days people don't even know. Everything has been collapsed to a very narrow band, and people don't even understand how this used to be. So the males knew that for them, in order to pursue that plan, they had to find females to create, so that they could create through them. This is the genesis, if you like, of the galactic wars. So they were chasing after the females from the Pleiades, so the Taurus constellation. They were chasing after Sirius, after Lyra, after different constellations. This is what we know today as the mythology of the sky. And then after these wars sort of took their time, the females were, according to the stories, they escaped and created the earth. So they wanted to escape, and this is why the earth is kind of quite special, because this is the last landing. This is the last place of solace. They came here and they created this place. And mind you, I don't know if it's flat, if it's round. I don't know even where it is in sense of orientation to the rest of the cosmos. I don't know whether we are in some kind of cosmos, or what does it look like. I don't think it's that necessary. Of course, we can be interested and we can inquire, but I don't think it's that necessary to the answer would change so much. I think we know that we've been lied to, and that's good enough. But this realm was created, and then these parasites sort of track down or trace down the females, the essence of feminine creative force down to this realm. And this is where the wars sort of played out further. So that was the context. This is what we know in every mythology as the for example, the Marduk against the Tiamat, right? This female, the female creative force, and not just force, it's a being against her own kind even. And then the males kind of overtake. So the firmament and that whole bubble, as I call it, because I quite see it as like a capsule, like we have been kind of, captured into a capsule. We're living under the dome. We're living inside of some kind of chamber. Why? Well, because this is how they can run their plan. This is the only way in which they can create their own reality and feed off of it. In that process, they fully. What does it mean to disconnect from the feminine? It means, unfortunately, that over time they have been sort of falling deeper and deeper into these low vibrational energies, and we know that, right? All they feed off is fear, is depression, is rage, anger, lowest vibrational content, and they need to keep producing that. This needs to be produced. This world is clearly not full of amazing sort of vibrations. It is full of suffering. There's plenty of, look at us, right? Just because we are more conscious doesn't mean that it's so much better for us, right? It's still the grind. You have to keep running. You have to be the hamster on the wheel. Don't get any time to think about yourself. And there is the fear that if you don't do that, then you're gonna lose your house. You're gonna lose all your means to live with. That creates a certain environment. It creates the pressure. It creates everything that it needs to create the conditions for fear and low vibrational emotions, right? Especially for those who are totally unaware. They just think that, well, life is hard, right? Life is tough. Why do we have so much trauma? Why do we have all these difficult childhoods, right? Everybody with a difficult childhood, everybody had something that they have to overcome as they grow up. None of that is an accident. That's by design. Everything here is by design. Literally that too, because that's the food. Lush, right? That's the food.
Yeah.
So this is why they created this, like a farm, right? Like Eden, the farm.
But is it possible, like you're referencing the firmament references across different ancient cultures and texts, but is it possible that they were just referencing the sky? They were just referencing the band of stars? Like, how is it so easy to draw the conclusion that it is a physical dome that we're encapsulated within? Like, we know that they used imagery to express themselves in various ways. So when we see these arcs or these beings or these gods being a firmament type shape, like, is it not possible that we're just referring to the sky?
I mean, but what is the sky and what is the dome, right? I don't really care how we call it. I just see.
But I mean, if it's a sky, then we're not imprisoned. We're not encapsulated. If it is just the sky that they were pointing towards with some kind of symbology.
I don't think we're necessarily dealing with a physical. Yeah, I don't think it's relevant whether it's physical, whether it's glass, whether it's steel, or whether it's a step in dimensions. I don't think that's really the sort of key here. I don't think it changes the fact that there is a mechanism of control over us, which we see the very works of, but we also know about it because the story of that is coded not just in mythology and ancient texts. It's coded in legends. It's coded in verbal, in oral tradition, right? It's coded in fairy tales. So how is it possible that all that contains not only a story that, there's a sky and it's nice, but it contains a much deeper story that unfortunately is not very benevolent, right? It contains references to, and it's consistent. It's consistent across the board that something is happening. And then on top of that, as I always say, look at your life, not at just look at across the board, right? Look at this world. If everything is just so random, then why aren't we living a great life? How many of us want a bad life? Clearly, there is somebody that benefits from us constantly living in a low vibrational state. So when you marry all that together, and including when you marry that with the indigenous and cultures, prophecies or sort of stories about this world and what it is, everything is very consistent, and everything is talking the same language, the same story. So this is how we know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to engage a little bit, I guess. I personally feel like I live a great life. I think Yerasimos feels the same way. I think much of our audience does as well. That's not to negate that there's definitely suffering that exists, but at what point does this diminish human responsibility and the choices that we make in terms of the life that we end up living and experiencing? Sure, I could have taken a life of being on a hamster wheel, never having time to be self-aware or to observe myself and to think deeper, to contemplate deeper. But I made certain choices in my life which kind of allow me to have the space to do so. So I'm just curious where human personal responsibility falls into this paradigm for you.
It doesn't absolutely strip humans of responsibility. If anything, I always say that we sort of tend to blame everything on the matrix this, matrix that, but matrix is not how do I say it? I like to say matrix is inside of us, not outside of us, right? So it's not what they did to us, because what they did to us, even if they did to us, that was long time ago. Every single day, every single one of us chooses to engage in that, chooses to engage in those programs, chooses to engage in that kind of world. So and mind you, I know what you mean, that you say you're living a great life, and I'm not having the bad life either, but that's kind of not the point, that we are able to navigate to a good degree, right? I think that a lot of people who starting to see something more, there is an element of becoming more conscious, and that has some good consequences. But there's plenty of people, there's plenty of circumstances which are just not accidental. If you think about it, where is the suffering in this world coming from? Why do we have wars? We don't have wars because people of one country decided to go against people of another country. Nobody decides that. That's not decided at this level. It's decided at a totally different level, and it's decided strategically for certain reasons. Why do we have children that are being killed in rituals? Why does that even happen, right? Where does it go? What happens with that? This is not, are we as humans, is that normal? That's not normal. This is not normal. So where is all that coming from, right? And when you look a little bit deeper into that, in a context of this world, we could all have a great life, but the law is not even designed for that, to allow that, to support it. Why not? Why is the law not, why do we even have money that everybody needs to be chasing? And I understand that, many of us might be a little bit more, perhaps, I don't know, tuned in about how to navigate with that. But there's plenty of people, majority of the world, are living in poverty. Why is that? If life is so great, and I'm not stripping it from sort of personal responsibility, but I'm just saying, I'm sure you've been around the world to many places, and there are places where people are disadvantaged. Why can't there be, abundance for everybody? And I'm not talking utopia. Everything is by design here. Things are by design. things don't have to be the way they are.
Yeah, I don't discount that there's forces of control by any means whatsoever, and that there's interference and interventions. And I'm kind of just having the discussion for the sake of the discussion, because I want to get as much of the juice out of this
Sure.
as possible, for sure. And it's like, what role does, like, I guess, the spiritual evolution of humanity play in this? Like, are we just at a stage of human evolution where man is still asleep in many ways? There is so much unconsciousness that pervades throughout humanity and throughout the planet. And is it the potential that the wars that we see and the poverty and the suffering can also just be an emanation of that sleepiness of man, of that unconsciousness, just to, I guess, throw another factor in there potentially?
Well, when you look into history, right, over time, it wasn't the fact that we were uneducated or that we didn't have sort of certain level of consciousness that was responsible for poverty, because actually right now we have very advanced level of, well, everything, technology, right, means of producing things, etc. But the poverty is very, very high and very, very common. But back in the day, when people were actually living more sort of closer to the land, I'm not saying that they were very rich, but because again, rich and being rich is a matrix concept, right? Rich as in what? I own 10 yachts that I don't need. That's not rich. I'm talking about integrity, dignity, right? Dignity. So people could actually live. They could own things. The things were truly there. They could put food on the table. Maybe from our perspective, it wasn't much because we are used to owning, having, but that's matrix program. This is a matrix. Again, this is back to what I'm saying, right? You have to become someone, you have to mean something. But I'm just saying that, we are the most advanced. Well, so we think, right now, but we kind of went backwards.
But do you think there's an element of over-idealizing the past there? Because, like, I mean, what about feudalism? What about slavery? What about the thousands and millions of people that lived in servitude, much of which, even though there is a lot of suffering that takes place today, I guess with the rise of individualism,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But where does slavery come from? Who came up with slavery, right? Back to pyramid structure. And where the pyramids are, who built the pyramids, right? The pyramids are not just pyramids. They're not just something that you want to visit because it's ancient. Pyramids are physical, but they are also a manifestation. That is that reptilian ideology of classes, of levels. You have to climb the ladder. You have to become something. So the ladder structure, the pyramid structure, the fact that there was slavery meant there are better and there are worse. There are people that are above and there are people that are below, which is precisely coming from the pyramid mentality. And that is not our original mentality. And I absolutely agree with you that there is an element of ownership in us. Absolutely. And until today, I always say, there's not going to be any judgment day. There's not going to be any ostracism that is going to bring these beings. And now we're going to be, if right. I mean, of course, I understand that you're still kind of investigating whether that's even holds water. I understand, but I'm just saying that even in my world, nobody's gonna do that. Nobody's gonna bring anybody and hold them responsible. The responsibility is in us for engaging, in us for living according to a paradigm that they have once pushed. That's not ours. That does not serve humanity. These are reptilian codes. These are reptilian codes of dominance and servitude. These are reptilian codes of poverty. I'm better, you're worse. You're below me, I'm above you. These are not our codes. So why do we apply them in our home? Because that's true, right? I don't care. We don't have to look outside. We have to look inside of our own homes, right? How much violence is there? How much abuse is there? And even without that abuse, there is still a lot of programs that are running that are not ours originally to begin with. They're not ours. You mentioned spirituality. Aren't we that evolved, or should we be more evolved, or is this not good enough? Well, do we really need evolving spiritually, or is that also a program of this matrix that we need to be evolving, or perhaps we should be collapsing? We should be collapsing the very false architecture that we have walked into. What kind of architecture? The architecture that pulls people out of their own natural element and tells them to go and seek prestige, status, tells them that we are not equal. I have to be better than you. That kind of, the programs of religions, the programs of, this whole false matrix stands on the fact that somebody is better than somebody else. And you need to buy into that. But it buys into the fact that, ethics, morals are also serving this matrix so that you behave and you're going to be rewarded for certain behaviors, mostly within the very construct that is keeping you and controlling you. So I'm asking you, why can't people entertain that perhaps the way we are living, and I'm not just talking the fact that we have all these super houses, etc., cars. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, why can't we entertain the idea that this world is not our world? This is not reality. That human nature is really built for. And you see, this is very common when I have these conversations with women. It's what they say. It's what they bring to me. They say, I'm tired. I'm tired of this world. I'm tired of the fact that whatever I do, it's just never the carrot always, is fleeting from me.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Oh, sorry, no, keep going.
Sorry.
I'll say, what is the difference then between the women that come to you and they're like, oh, I'm tired, to the women that are like, I love my life, I love my partner, I love my children. Like, what's the difference? Have they collapsed? Have they collapsed more?
No, they don't. It's not about that they don't love their children and they don't love their partners. They love their children and partners, but they can see through the illusion.
No, I get it. I'm not saying, I wasn't saying that those people that come to you don't love their children. I'm just saying the women that come to you that see through the illusion that I'm tired and everything I do and it doesn't work. But then there are people who see through the illusion that are content in their life and have lovely families and do work that inspires them. So what's the difference?
I think you're kind of creating a sort of two groups that I don't really see that there is a group that's coming to me that's, I don't know, unfulfilled or unhappy. I'm just saying that more and more people are seeing through the illusion. That's what I'm saying. That there are a lot of women that are saying that they are starting to see that we have been sold. Because, what you're talking about being, content and all that very often is rooted in being very much plugged into this very matrix, right? It's and there's a lot of people, and I specifically work a lot with women. So this is why I mentioned women. They will come to me and they're starting to see that, we have walked so far away from our original sort of nature, and literally physically nature, and there's a window behind me, so that's what I'm showing, and literally nature. I think it's the same journey that I've been through when I came here. I got kicked out of oil and gas. When I was plugged into oil and gas, I also had a great life. I have a great life now as well, but it's a totally different life. It's a totally different life.
I wasn't talking about the women that are content, that are plugged into the 9-to-5 matrix. I'm talking about women that live close to the land, nature, maybe they're homesteading or whatever the case may be. They've already seen through the illusion and then created a life where they feel happy and fulfilled or connected. That's what I'm talking about there. Like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, what is, like, we all live in this world, yet some people don't feel like we're imprisoned, and then other people feel like we're in prison.
Because I don't think it's about, knowing that we're in prison doesn't mean that you have to live a bad life, right? That's the whole point. You have to know that you're in prison so that you can start sort of getting out of the prison, right? You're not going to get out of the prison if you don't know that you're in prison. So my point is, well,
I I'm still in my own process of whether or not I believe that we're completely imprisoned and that there's something preventing us from leaving. Not that I'm saying I want to leave, but
What do
but
you mean by leaving?
well, I'm just saying that I don't know if I believe 100%. Well, I believe in power structures and that there are people that are controlling us. I agree with you there. But I don't have at the base root of my belief system that I'm imprisoned, therefore I need to do certain things. My belief system is I have the gift of life. I want to make the most of it. So there's a difference there, in my opinion.
Yeah, but of course, this, if we look at it in a sort of deeper esoteric ways, right? Then there is this whole notion of, okay, what does freedom? What is freedom? What does freedom truly look like, right? And I guess the point is, how much of the programming do you know that is still just the programming? It might be compelling. It gives us a great life. If we are talking in those kind of in this way, right? Then we can say, okay, so if there is a billionaire, then he's living even a greater life, right? He doesn't have a clue about Matrix. He doesn't have a clue about this life. He has all the money in this world. So he must be having a great life. Well,
many of them
again,
aren't, though. I don't think all billionaires are living a great life. So I don't.
Yeah, but what I'm just trying to do is just to show that I don't think necessarily having a great life or saying that somebody's having a great life is truly sort of grasping the idea of what this matrix does to you. I don't think a person might say that I'm homeschooling my kids, I'm living on a farm, I'm cultivating my own produce, and I'm eating healthy. So yeah, and I'm great, but that still doesn't necessarily mean that you have gotten to the very core, to that deeper kind of level. Where do they still got you? Are they still kind of keeping a hold on you? And I know that you say, well, I don't believe it's any them, so I don't care. Well, yeah, but then it's this whole debate, is that, does it even matter, right? Does it even matter to know the truth or not?
But does that eventually feel like something that, despite how much work you do, despite how fulfilled you feel, then it can kind of just be used, but you still haven't gotten to the root of it. You still haven't understood the base root of reality. Like, it feels like a potential, another carrot that you can never grasp, you can never catch. Like, where can someone just be like, wow, I'm great. I exist. I'm grateful for my life. I'm living on purpose. I feel lit up. I feel excited. I got healthy relationships. And it's like, when can that be enough in this paradigm?
No, it's not. That's I think what you've described about this kind of never-ending work. Yeah. I absolutely don't advocate any work. That's very kind of psychology based and. But
you said that person still hasn't grasped the truth of it. So like, what do you call that? If you're saying this person maybe still hasn't gotten to the root of it, what do you call that if not work?
Well, it's not really work. It's the awareness. It's the truth.
Isn't there work to build awareness? Isn't there work to get somewhere?
Not really, because when 5 years ago, not in my mind, because when 5 years ago the this whole nonsense started, which of course you are aware of, right, with the COVID and the vaccines later, etc. Some people knew immediately or very quickly, right, that this is all a hoax, this is all a lie. And some did not, and some do not until now, right? So you see, the fact that some people knew from the beginning, from all walks of life, that it was a hoax, was not really a result of some work that they did to get to that point that now they finally see that it's a hoax. It was like this. It's a resonance. It's the truth. It's something that you either are there, or some of the people still don't know what happened, right?
I agree with you.
I think there's work that needs to be done.
I agree with you. And I think there were those people that they just knew. And there are people that have spent 10 to 15, 20, 30 years studying the power global structures that we've been talking about here.
Yeah.
So they understood that this was part of the plan. So there was work that got them to that place. So how do you differentiate? There's some people who just go, or maybe some people grew up in communistic countries, like in Eastern Europe. There are many people I know in this country who haven't done any of the work, but they grew up in Eastern Europe and say they saw what happened in their lands. And so when it was coming to the US, they were like, nah, I know I've seen this before. So is part of life experience part of work?
Not really, because, I come from Poland, and there's a lot of people, including my family, right? My own family, who have been living in Poland for all these years, and they have this kind of post-communistic and pre-communistic, mentality, and they still don't know what happened, right? They still.
But that's what I'm saying, is that like we can't. How do we know it's work or it's just awareness? There's so many different variables.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's worked. Because you have people who claim to have been. I don't really care about anyone saying that they've been doing some research or they've been at something for 20 years, 50 years. It doesn't matter, because there are doctors that have been doing their degrees for 40 years and they believed in COVID, right? So the work that this.
But there's different types of research and work as well.
I mean,
there's
those doctors have been
specifically
indoctrinated to believe in COVID. Like, it's the exact opposite of the work that we're referencing.
Yeah, but my point is that it's not the work. What is the work? What is the work? What is the work that takes your consciousness there? That it's perhaps.
Did you know astrology was a cult when you were a kid? When you were studying astrology, or did you study to get to a point to understand this stuff? Like, this is what I'm just trying to say. Like, don't we, like, you didn't just come up with the stuff that you teach about and talk about now. Like, it didn't just come to you.
You went through a process, right?
You did work to get to it.
Yeah, sure. But I went through a process, but it wasn't the result of me learning more and more astrology that I suddenly realized that it's all, a part of this matrix. There's something about the consciousness. There's something about, I think it's not about work, which feels like, you need to do more. You need to do more. Actually, I feel that you have to strip more. You have to collapse.
I think we're having a semantics game here about what work is. That's what I'm thinking. I think there's just like a disconnect here. Like, I'm not saying work is like, oh, I got to do more. Like, I think work, a lot of the work is what you just said: collapsing, dissolving away, deconditioning. So I don't think maybe there's just a disconnect in how we're viewing the word work, but I could be wrong.
I mean, okay, let's take that. But you see, I don't think that I understood or realized what I did about astrology because I have been studying or toying with astrology for 20 years. I think I understood what's going on. It was very much, I think, fed by the context of the last 5 years. As in literally something happened, right? 5 years ago when all this started, some of us instantly knew and the rest didn't. So around that time, pretty much around the same time, I sort of collected the dots on the astrology, numerology, on the firmament, etc. Everything just fell in place. So I don't, and some of the things that also fell in place, I had not been looking into since I was a child. I just, they just happened to come in, fly in later. So I don't think that everything is a result of some work, because there
I
are
agree with
people
you.
out there
I agree
that
with
are
you
not
there.
doing any work.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It's hard for me to just say 100% it's no work for anyone. You know what I mean? Like, people come to realizations in different ways. Like, to paint every single person in their process as having to just have to come from awareness and not put any effort or energy or work into it, where they come to that awareness.
But what is work?
Well, I mean, for example, someone who had a vaccine injured child in 2015 and experienced devastation in their home, then spent the next 5 years studying vaccines. Then 2020 comes along and they're like, oh shit, what's all the research they did between 2015 and 2020?
Yeah, but you know that it wasn't those people, it wasn't like that kind of people were the majority that knew that this is a hoax. That's not who it was. Those people that knew that it was a hoax had probably nothing to do with vaccines, or it was not based on experience. It was not based on, I have experienced this and now I have learned. It was just like, you just knew, right?
Well, anyways, we can keep going around in circles with this part of it because it's hard to know. Like I don't know everyone. I haven't lined up, let's say, 500 million people of the total population that knew it was a hoax. I don't know how many people knew it was a hoax to find out why they knew it was a hoax.
Yeah, I was just giving an example of what is work. Like, what do you call the research that person did because they tried to understand why their child was autistic
No,
or was experiencing a certain that's like what is it's just a word. It feels like it's just a word that there's an agenda against here. Like to me, that's work. That person, they experienced an extremely challenging, traumatic thing, and they engaged deeply to try to understand a thing. You know, like
no, I hear what you're saying, but you know, from what I have understood over the past 5 years, and I've been talking to a lot of people. I've been engaged in many groups on Facebook, talking to people on many interviews as well, and people sort of commenting about it and writing me personally. Of course, I did not speak with 500 million people, but there is a consistency. I have probably hardly ever heard a story that I knew what was going on because I have seen, you know, I have educated myself. I have always heard from people that they just knew.
Our entire audience pretty much is human beings who educated themselves about vaccines pre-2020. Our entire audience, I can speak for probably at least over 70, 80%, I would say.
Okay. Well, my experience has been that people.
Yeah. And so the answer is that it's not absolute. So then the answer is that it's not absolute then, right?
Or the answer is that your audience is very specific. Maybe these are people that are, I don't know, into finding things through educating themselves rather than.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't need beyond my audience. I'm talking about over the last however many years being in this world, but even in the last 5 years, my wife and I were hosting gatherings, bringing people together because we live in Southern California. And from a political standpoint, things were different. The majority of the people that would come that found us weren't just people that just woke up one day in 2020 and said, oh, I'm not doing this. Now there were definitely people, but I wouldn't say the majority of people that were hip to the control structures that we've been talking about this entire episode. They weren't just like, oh, I'm a banker and an accountant, and then poof, I'm not getting the vaccine. That's just I'm sharing my.
To be fair as well, the vaccine was not the first thing that showed up in 2020. The first thing that showed up was the whole bakery, right?
Yes, yes.
So I'm just questioning that if somebody a year and a half is still making a decision based on the fact that they looked into vaccines not being safe, then I'm going to question if they ever knew from the beginning what was going on.
I said vaccine to symbolize COVID. I wasn't meaning exactly 1.1 years into 2020, but there are people who, when COVID happened, they weren't just like, poof, I'm not going to go along with it. A lot of people I know did. Most people I know did. And the ones that didn't, I'd love to say the majority of them would just realize it out of the blue and had not done zero research into any of the control structures, but that's just not the case. So again, we just have different probably demographics of people we're interacting with.
Mm-hmm. Probably.
I want to get more into astrology and the cult of astrology. Like, how do you explain people that have gotten a lot of value from astrology or numerology that has allowed them to, I don't know, understand themselves more?
Well, I think it's a critical thing is to understand what's a value, because there's a lot of people out there that think that understanding themselves is actually changing something, and it's not. You can be going to therapy, and that's why people are in therapy for many years, because they are understanding their wounds, they are recycling the narrative, but that is not actually fixing anything. And this is where we're coming to the crux of it, that understanding on its own, knowing, bringing something to your awareness is not fixing anything.
What fixes things?
Well, what fixes things? That's a good point. And then this is why I asked you earlier, what is work? What is work and what is it about? Because I thought you meant it in this context, that people are doing something to like heal themselves or fix themselves. And what if I told you that the whole concept is just false?
Let's just say it's false. Well, let's say it's false. Then how does a person live?
Well, a person lives, and for example, if you look to the indigenous people, right, of every culture, there was never a therapy there. Nobody was going to therapy, and nobody was going to any kind of courses and methods and modalities. But there was a shaman, and what they were interested in is the soul. So the work was done at the soul level, never at the subconscious level or consciousness level. There was never any talk about what happened, how do you feel, etc., which is only reinforcing whatever you already dealing with. It is not stripping anything. It is not fixing anything. So back in those cultures, the people were working, or they understood that something needs to happen at the soul level. Something needs to happen at the totally. You cannot fix the system from inside of the system. You have to kind of step outside of it. So
how would they communicate though? Don't you have to have some level of the mental world? Because how are they communicating to one another?
Communicating what?
Like if you went to see a shaman, did you just stand there and then the shaman did things to you? Like how did a person receive support from a shaman?
Well, for example, the person would go to a shaman and they would say that they are feeling, I don't know, disconnected from themselves or whatever. They feeling they are struggling. Something in their life is showing that things are not running the way it was before, or something is just seems to be showing up for them in some shape and form, which is destructive to them. And actually, there would be no conversation with the shaman, because the soul work doesn't work at that level. The shamanic work would be about the shaman going outside of that mental construct, the mental concept of let's talk about it. That's not what shaman does. So shaman would take a journey, right?
So the shaman's mute, like there's no communication at all going on between the shaman and the person who's going and sharing about their feelings and what's going on.
They're not sharing about their feelings. They're not sharing about their feelings.
You just said they were.
No, I just said no. You just
said they would. You just said they would go to the shaman and tell them how they're feeling and what's going on.
No, they wouldn't tell them how they're feeling. They would tell them why they came there. So they're coming, for example, because they feel something is off. That's enough for a shaman. Something is off with me. I feel disconnected from myself or whatever. Everything in my life is going wrong. That's the level of conversation.
That's all I'm saying. You just said the word feel. So I'm saying they're sharing the feelings, what's going on. I'm just trying to mirror back the languaging that's happening here.
No, because you're trying to, it feels like you're trying to tell me that shaman was running a therapy, and shaman was not running any therapy. Nobody needed to be talking about feelings, because that's not how you fix things. The feeling, to talk about feelings, therapeutic kind of setting is actually, this is why people sit in those therapies for years.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I was just countering the fact that there's the words feelings going on, and then you said there was no feelings. So there's language.
Because the feelings are irrelevant. Very often you will just show up to the shaman and because you that was the only person that you would go to when you felt something is off. You don't have to tell your story, because it doesn't make any difference, because the shaman is not working with what you tell him. The shaman is working on a totally different level and in a totally different aspect field, right? Which is the shaman goes into a journey. Why? Because the work that he needs to do is not with your conscious construct. So it's irrelevant what you tell him. What you tell him is just a symptom of what is happening on a totally different level. And this is precisely how the work used to be done back in the day, but not just shaman is a kind of aftermath of feminine alchemy, which was much sort of older tradition. But since we were talking about the shamanic aspects here, the shaman knew that whatever you feel, for example, you could be feeling that, I don't know, people feel blocked because something's not happening in their life. They feel, so they go to therapy, they talk about it, right? And then they're spending their months, years, not much is happening. But the shaman is not interested in the symptoms, in what you tell, because it's irrelevant. That's the story that you tell yourself very often, right? The shaman is going after the fact that something inside of you, that integral part of you, which is what they call the soul, perhaps became disconnected from, or there's a fragment that went missing. Something, the wholeness has been lost. The wholeness in your system has been lost. So shamans, why is it a shaman? Because the healing does not happen in this realm. This realm is not where it can happen, as in this reality. This is why most modalities fail. It's a feel-good factor. You might spend some money and you might feel like, okay, it better be bringing some results. So you talk yourself into results, but in reality, in your life, not necessarily an effect, right? But the shamans operate outside of that reality, because we know from these teachings that what is truly responsible for your experience and what's going on in sort of this reality is at a totally different level, which is the soul level. So the shaman would take a journey to go find that piece that went missing, and bring it back and seal it into wholeness. No conversation is required, because whatever is happening in your consciousness is just a symptom of what happened at that deeper level.
So the healing's coming from outside of you, not within you. Like the shaman's the one doing the healing, and the person has
the shaman would facilitate for the indigenous people some of the healing, but absolutely, as per the alchemical teachings, the person should have been and used to be capable of doing that themselves. So yeah, in alchemical tradition, a person would every person would be able to do that journey.
So,
but
yeah, no, I hear you. I'm loving this conversation. So in today's world, people that, let's say, don't work with a shaman, or someone who operates like a shaman, is all that work meaningless? Like, or work? I don't want to say the word work, but those experiences they're having, if they're doing nervous system work, or other forms of quote unquote work to help them alchemize, transmute things, understand things, and I don't know, love themselves more and live better lives, or maybe help see through more illusions. Is that not meaningful? What are the modern day shamans, and how do you think people in this world can improve or remember? Again, I'm trying to figure out the language here.
And what if I said that a lot of what we see, or a lot of what's been sold to us as some kind of healing modalities,
it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Yeah. I agree with you. I agree. So much of the stuff out there is bullshit, but some isn't.
Yeah.
And it's not. And it relates differently to, let's say, how shamans did things in the past. Like, are we all supposed to? What's going to improve our world? Like, how? What's your solution to whatever's happening right now? We live in this prison, and we're being harvested for loosh. Where do we go from here?
You might have missed the question, Yerasimos, but Ola asked you, so what methodologies isn't bullshit?
Yeah.
I think the more we connect to our soma, our body and sensations, and less conscious languaging, and just understand what's happening in our body from a sensation level, this is pre-verbal language, can support us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that, but that's not a method. I thought you meant like there is some kind of, we mentioned therapy, but there's
somatic practices, somatic experiencing. There's many different modalities out there. My wife has her PhD, not that matters. She's trained in different non-mainstream modalities that focus on your essence and your sensation and your body. It's not about like, oh my God, my dad left me when I was 4, and then you just keep saying the same thing over and over again. There's a lot of stuff out there. You may not be aware of it. I don't mean to be condescending. You may just not be aware of it because you're in your world, in your bubble, and what you've experienced the last 5 years. There's a whole world. I'm just saying that, like, I don't know what you know. Like the stuff you talk about, those things I've watched about feminine alchemy, it's amazing. It's incredible. I don't know it. And so I just feel like there's so much knowledge and wisdom out there that support people. I think it's kind of arrogant for anyone, myself or yourself or Joel, to just kind of like immediately be like, oh, there's nothing out there. Like all that stuff is bullshit.
It's not for me to be judging if there is nothing out there. You invited me to speak about the teachings of feminine line, and that's what I'm saying. I'm telling you about the teachings of the feminine line. Teachings of the feminine line are very specifically explaining that there's a lot of things out there that are constructs of this matrix. And even though when you think you were bypassing, or you're sort of not dealing, you're really going deep, you are still operating with the mind. You're dealing with the mind. You're not bypassing the subconscious or anything like that. You're actually still dealing with the subconscious, and they still become programs and methods. Feminine alchemy actually teaching about the fact that our perfect health, and there's no need to get agitated here, that our perfect health is written within our DNA. We don't need any methods. We don't need nothing external is actually needed. What's needed is that we come back to our full DNA activation, which is not a method in itself. Again, it's not like some kind of special, protocol for activating a DNA. Absolutely not. But perfect health, as you might imagine, is actually written in our DNA, and it's sitting in the part of DNA that the science today calls the junk. So we have only so many % that are supposedly operational or even useful, and the rest of it is just junk sitting there. Well, there's no need to get defensive, but I'm here to represent certain, which is what you invited me for. So I'm just
of course, we're having a passionate conversation. Like, we don't have to agree on everything. So if someone disagreeing with you is defensiveness, then that's your take. That being said, what is feminine alchemy? Let's get into that a little bit, if you're open to.
Well, feminine alchemy is the probably the best way to explain it is the full capacity of it's feminine alchemy, so of a woman's hormonal system. As it happens, women are created in a way whereby we have a different hormonal system than men, for a variety of reasons. Not just the hormonal system, but of course also the physical body, the presence of the womb, the presence of certain organs that are within a woman for certain functions. We have been over time exposed to the fact that women are only kind of capable in distinction to a man, right, of giving birth to a child, and maybe they are not as, I don't know, strong as a man, but physically. But actually there is a whole spectrum of abilities that a woman's body and a woman through her is able to deliver purely based on the function of her hormonal system, the full capacity of the hormonal system. This is why we're talking about alchemy. So the full capacity of a hormonal system is a function of activation of the rest of the DNA. So the DNA, why do we have DNA that's junk? I mean, is it junk or hasn't been branded as junk, right? That doesn't really, why would something in our body be redundant? Just junk sitting there, and it's actually 90% of it.
Do you think early man / woman was genetically manipulated by these, so-called gods?
Well, I don't think there was anything such as early man, or not in the context of some kind of primitive, like a kind of monkey type of
caveman.
That's a lie, right? So not in that context, but yes, that there's been a manipulation, and I think this is exactly what we're living with. But the manipulation was not to evolve; the manipulation was to devolve, right? It was to shut us down. This is why what we're looking at, what the scientists are looking at in our bodies, they say, oh, this is junk. This is inactive. It's just sitting there. Well, as it happens, it has its function, but it's been disabled. It's been through what you just mentioned, the genetic interventions, it has been kind of switched off.
Yeah.
So the question is, so what's in there? So if it's been switched off and it's just deactivated, but it's sitting there, but it's not active, so what's in there? And that's what precisely feminine alchemy tells us very, very abundantly. What's in there? Well, what's in there is perfect health. What's in there is the fact that the body regenerates itself, meaning death becomes a choice, as in you choose the point. You choose the point. And we also know from history, from historical accounts, that back in the day, there are deaths that were chosen, as in people decided to go and sort of lay down rather than and leave this realm, rather than death as a result of diminishing capacity of the body. What's also written in there, and of course it kind of differs, but for women specifically, is parthenogenesis. So parthenogenesis is not a myth. It is present in our makeup. So
is that parthenogenesis like being impregnated by spirit or
well, not by
or
spirit.
not non-physical, like you don't need man and semen to impregnate?
Yes. So parthenogenesis is the capacity of a woman to become pregnant without participation of a male, right? So this is, but yeah, I mean, made a reference to the Holy Spirit, but yeah, that is what's in the Bible, right? The Immaculate Conception. It is precisely referring to this, because that aspect, all those aspects that we're talking about, are written, and they are in a woman. They are connected to so-called alchemical aspect of a virgin. This is why Mary, mother of Jesus, is always referred to in the Bible, Virgin Mary, Virgin Mary. It's a title. It's an alchemical title. It's not a physiological sort of state. It's a title. So, but back, you see, the reason I want to sort of go back to the healing and the perfect health, not healing, but the perfect health, is because in our very DNA, we hold the whole sort of design to replicate, to replenish, to rejuvenate, and also to reject anything that is not, how to say, sort of maybe not compatible, but that doesn't support, right, our sort of best interest, if you like. Think about it as I always make that comparison. Think about it as a woman who is pregnant with a child that's inside of her, right? And there is an umbilical cord that connects them, right? Through the placenta, between the baby and the mother. So the mother never needs to think, what does she need to now feed the baby, or what kind of nutrients or minerals or whatever she needs to send in there. And the baby never prays to her and never asks her, can you please take this out? Can you give me more of that? Everything is this beautiful alchemical intelligent design. Everything happens to sustain, not just sustain life, but to optimize, maximize, right, the experience for this baby. So this mother is suddenly the woman that's pregnant is suddenly capable of, very often she undergoes some nice processes herself, right? Things get replenished in that woman. So what's activating there, right? But also she nourishes the child. So our DNA happens to kind of act, and this is reflected in the Hindu teachings as well. It's almost like there should be this invisible cord, invisible thread connecting us to like a galactic womb, like a cosmic womb, or the earth womb. Also kind of, they literally, they talk about it being a cord, like an umbilical cord. So as if we were to be constantly replenished by some kind of force, like a cosmic force, cosmic womb, something like that. It's a way of describing it, but the point is, it's your DNA that holds that. So when you say to me that, what's the problem with healing? Healing works. Well, alchemy actually tells us you don't need any healing. Any healing system outside of you is a false kind of system, because you have everything written in your design. So the problem is not to find a healing and a healer and a healing system. The problem is, why is your DNA not activated? How to activate, right? How to activate is a bit new agey, but just how to regain that connection to the rest of the DNA, how to bring it on stream, right? So that it can, so that you can actually utilize it, right? And that's precisely what the alchemical teachings tell us. And the teachings talk about, specifically the DNA part is linked to the virgin aspect, and the virgin aspect is linked to purity. purity, not in a sexual sense, it's not about that. Purity as in purity of the grail, of the vessel. And the purity specifically in the alchemical sense is linked to certain emotions or lack of those emotions that should be the case. And it's to do with the lowest vibrational emotions, the shame and guilt. Yeah. So you see, now you can kind of see how it all comes together, that in this world, very often, since we are children, right? And then throughout life, we are exposed to being shamed and feel guilty. Like it's been poured into us very often since we're children. That shame and guilt in all sorts of forms, right? I was talking, I had consultations very often with ladies that sort of, share some personal stories, and some of them, experienced, for example, some kind of level of sexual abuse or physical abuse. And they all say, all of them as children, right? As children. And all of them say that when that was happening, they felt too ashamed to tell someone. So this is, and of course that can happen to men as well, but I just happen to have more contact with women. But, the point is that this is so ingrained in us, right? Since we are children, that this shame and guilt just enters the body like a plague, like parasite, and it sits there, and it happens to be the lowest vibrations. And as it happens, the way they designed it, the way this works is that if you hold those low vibrational emotions like shame and guilt, they are, sorry, it's my cat making an entrance. They are they are sort of filling the vessel with lead, because we're talking alchemy. Lead as in, like the chemical element, but of course it's not the chemical element, but alchemically we would say lead, the heavy element. And when we carry that inside of us, inside of the heart, inside of the womb, it disconnects that ability for the DNA to keep sort of activating. This is why, what else is in the DNA? So I'll give you a real example. In the DNA, it's also ability to connect and cross within our world with other realms, such as being able to see other beings, maybe elves, maybe dwarves, and look at children, right? Especially the younger children. And I know that we say, oh, this is imaginary friend, but very often they are able to perceive. Why? Because their DNA is not yet loaded with all that lead, all that heaviness, right? But unfortunately, as they grow older, as they are more exposed to culture, to the culture, to programming, to negative experiences, etc. It unfortunately, they start storing, especially that nobody teaches how to get rid of it. What would you do with it? How do you or just how do you protect the child not to be exposed to that, which was pretty much what the culture passed.
Let me ask you this question, Ola. So say there's an individual that grows up and they realize that they're experiencing lots of shame and guilt. Say they decide to engage with some kind of modality, whether it be a nervous system practitioner or deep somatic work or deep whatever, and they feel like a shift and a release of that shame and guilt, and they feel more whole. Is that like just a false paradigm for that person, or what would be your commentary on someone moving through shame and guilt in that way?
I can't comment to a situation that we are just
hypotheticals.
But okay, so beyond hypothetical, like people do release shame and guilt. They do move through these things, and they do engage with certain modalities and come to a place of feeling more whole. So what is your perspective on what's happening in that situation? Or is it just that's
I don't know if they truly release something, or they say that they release, or they hope that they release. I've had people coming to my readings, for example, and tell me, can I tell them what works, because they've been through everything and they thought they released it, but then half a year later or whatever situation happened, and it's back and it's still there, and nothing happens. So I think, I don't want to say this is, I don't think this conversation is about denying, people's experience. I think I'm just trying to say that, what the teachings are trying to tell us is actually very simple. It doesn't need any methods. It doesn't need any super, therapies, etc. And think about it also in a context of even in Africa, right? Maybe, and not just Africa, here up north as well. People, we have lost a lot of wisdom about the most simple things that help us. We have and we want some convoluted strategies and modalities, because it kind of feels like, if I invest $200 or $500, then there must be a return on the investment, right? But sometimes it's actually nature that really does wonders for us. For example,
I agree. I agree with you. I think we are, in most of the world, but especially in the Western world, we are disconnected from nature. We're disconnected from community. We're disconnected from a lot of stuff. A lot of that stuff is what prevents whatever shit's happening in the body, adaptations in the body, trauma. People are isolated in the West, and that is its own problem. And like I said before, a lot of stuff out there, a lot of modalities are scams and bullshit. So I agree. I think we're speaking a similar language there, and I think we need to return back to how we lived. And I'm not saying we all have to go live in the woods. But we just have to have a I don't know, an awareness of an understanding of why we've gone off path.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see what I mean also by nature. And since we're diving deep, let's go all in. You guys can cut it out later if it's too much.
Listen, we're here for the truth. We're here for conversations. We're here. We're not going to agree on everything. We're individual human beings. Like I think we live in a world where people are like, oh no, I just have to share what I share. You can't disagree with me. I'm not saying you're saying that. I love this shit. I'm Greek. I like passion and energy, and let's get into it. So let's go.
Okay, well, then let's do it. Well, you decide later. But you see, my point is that when it kind of comes down to the nature, because we often talk about nature and people think I'll take a walk. It's nature. Walk is not enough, even with bare feet. That's new age dressed up in a little bit more, grounded practices. No, what people used to do back in the day, and they still do that until now in some places, is, for example, okay, let's go there. Why do we not pour, as women, why don't we pour our menstrual blood on the ground, as in on the grass outside anymore? Women used to do that, and I'm going to tell you why. Why men and women do not go with their physiological needs, sometimes at least. I understand we all have beautiful houses, but I'm going to tell you why you don't go outside. I'm going to explain why.
You're saying, just to be clear for the audience, why don't we have sex or fuck in nature? Was that what we're trying to say? Or have sex or maybe love?
I was trying to talk about peeing, actually.
Oh, peeing.
She was talking about peeing and shitting in nature.
I pee in my trees all the time. I thought you meant you're talking about women and menstrual blood and then going out, men and women with their needs. I thought you were talking about having sex in nature. But maybe that too.
That too. But you see, what I'm after is the secretions.
Yes.
What I'm after here is the substances from your body. That why are they no longer shared with the earth? And I'm a
gardener. I pee in my trees all the time, so I get what you're saying.
Perfect. Sounds good. You see, maybe this is why you have a great life. Because the thing is that we have cut the cord. The cord has been cut between us and the earth, the womb, or whatever you want to call it, the cosmic, the earth womb. And that's not esoteric. This is why I'm always liking to walk sort of to the engineering side as well, not just the esoteric. So the point is, when you pour the blood, especially for women, when they pour the blood, obviously the menstrual blood on the ground, that blood contains your DNA, it contains your stem cells, it contains your material, that feeds the information into the ground. You work with the earth, right? You say you plant things.
Yeah,
You
I like planting.
that, right? You probably know that if you take seeds, before you plant them, and you
put it in your mouth.
Exactly, put them in your mouth, what happens?
I mean, I'm encoding something about me into the seeds.
Exactly.
I don't know the exact details. I haven't delved
Exactly.
into it deeply.
Exactly. So back from where I'm from, right? Women would do that because the plant is going to later read your DNA, and it also reads kind of from your, codes in there, what you need and what needs kind of specifically what it needs to build itself into, right? So there's an information. It's not bullshit. It's an information. So when you pour that blood into the ground, it's an information. It's an information that you send down. You are rebuilding this connection. You're sending an information down about what you need, not just in terms of like health-wise. You send an information. It's your whole code, because your destiny, as in your plan, not the God's plan, not the plan of this astrology or numerology, but your plan, is written in your DNA. So why isn't it active? Why isn't it running? Why can you come to a reading to me and I'm going to tell you things about you? I shouldn't be able to. We should be, you should be like the fool in the tarot, right? It should be everything and anything, not something that I can diagnose. I shouldn't be able to. So to activate that whole kind of, plan, if you like, to activate, to bring back the loop, because we need the loop. We don't have the loop. So the information is trying to come to us, but it doesn't find us because there's no input. We don't say, this is what I need. Let me show you. Let me give you my DNA. People in Africa, they still do that. Animals, right? Animals are all the time in nature. They walk in nature, they sleep, they do everything, but they leave their DNA in the nature. It's a little bit different from us, but with us, look what happened. We got closed into cities, into concrete buildings, right? Into plastic, whatever, cars, etc., metal. Nothing is nature anymore. We do not even understand the cycle of information. We do not even understand that when we go into the nature and we leave our imprints, we leave our literally secretions, those secretions will be read. It's like homeopathy, right? You don't need to be pouring your guts out there. It's a little bit is enough, right? So literally, you leave an information. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if it does, then think about planting and putting.
I don't think it sounds ridiculous.
I don't think it sounds ridiculous either.
I think, and I know some women that are hip to leaving their menstrual blood in the ground. Sometimes it can come through the New Age lens, which is a little bit much.
It can,
but it's okay. They're good. Yeah,
it can, but it's not meant to be ritualistic. This is not a ritual. You don't have to dance in a white skirt around it. You just do it. Nobody needs to know. Nobody needs to see. Just do it. Don't talk about it. You
mean you don't have to videotape yourself and post it on Instagram while you're doing it?
I happen not to do that. Yeah. So I think, you see, this is that part that has been hijacked by the New Age, by all these kind of healing modalities. Everything has been changed into the theatrics, right? The nature, which is there to work with you, is available, but there's been theatrics done around it, right? We have been, again, pushed back into a studio to do things in a sort of environment that's clinical, that's not out there, that's not connected. And people tell me, well, I love nature. I go for walks. Yeah, but you go for walks, you go for hikes. That's
recreational versus a deep relationship with nature.
Absolutely. And you see, when I think back about myself, since I came here and, like I said, everything kind of collapsed upon arrival, and I had to bring myself together. And I did at the time, that was like, we're going back 7-8 years, right? I did a lot of things. From therapy that I actually had to do, because I had to kind of play along with the system a little bit. It was kind of part of how I was playing things out at the time. It's like a regular therapy, that didn't do anything. That was annoying me because it was just making me angry. There was nothing coming out of it. But there were other things that I was doing as well. And I thought at the time they were also working. But what I was mostly drawn to is literally take my car and go for a drive, go out and sit by the ocean. And this is how, what Joel read at the beginning, right? When you were reading the sort of few lines about me, when I say that it was the spirit of the land, it was something in that nature that suddenly spoke to me in many ways. Suddenly I literally started going through some kind of process of, undoing myself and overcoming everything that I don't think any of these other modalities even touched. And at the end, when I kind of came out and I was totally different person, I thought, okay, let's sit down and let's write what happened so that I can maybe, tell other people, right, what to do. And I realized because I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I realized over time that it was none of the modalities. They were a feel-good factor. It's, because I was at the time being told certain things, given hope, etc. But the kind of reconstruction of me happened through that contact and that kind of feedback and rebuilding this connection that's true, meaningful, not some kind of hiking with not just the nature, but it's the spirit. This is conscious. This is not, this is not the rock, right? This is not just the mountain and just the tree. There is consciousness there. And when you tune back into that, which is precisely what the indigenous people and the old cultures, I mean, we are all indigenous, right? We are all indigenous. We are all, at some point, some generation, we all would have been living in that way, right? Back up the tree, as in, I don't know, 200, 500 years ago. We are all sort of in our lineage.
Yeah.
We have that. So that's what makes the difference. That's what makes the difference. And it's not just the nature, because you see with the DNA, when I mentioned that the shame and guilt is blocking the DNA from activating, there are energies, literally the sun. The sun is activating the energies that the sun is bringing in. Also Venus and other stars are literally trying to activate, that they are working on the DNA, they are passing certain energies. But the problem is when we are holding all this guilt and shame and we are walking and getting even more and more of that programming and all other emotions, it's very heavy. It's very difficult to activate when you are walking, clustered with all this stuff on top of you.
I love it. Real quickly, because I know we're going over time, but I know you talk about this, and I'd love to just touch on it. The Venus moon, like the differences and your views on the moon, because I know the moon is as a symbol for so much in like women's circles and woman healing. So I'd love to just hear your point of view on that before we go, if you're okay going a little extra time.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So again, I would ask everybody, because I think a lot of things that we believe in and we just go by because we walked into something and it was already there, right? Like the moon. Most women, if you ask them, like, why do you worship the moon? Is not because she was born with worshiping the moon. She walked into it at some point, right? Mostly through the New Age. She was exposed to it. She heard about it from YouTube, or she heard about it from some circle, and she seeking that kind of spiritual exposure and ritual, some kind of ceremony. She became part of it. But if you actually look a little bit deeper into it, in a lot of mythologies, the moon is masculine, and the moon is not representing the feminine; it's masculine. The sun is feminine, not the moon. And that's even a quick check into mythology and history. But if you dig a little bit deeper, then Venus starts showing up, and the fact that Venus has been so degraded and diminished that right now it's just one of the planets. But if you look into history, we have Venus and references to Venus in a lot of ancient texts, in a lot of stories. That there are stories talking about going to war and observing phases of Venus, not the moon, Venus. That's a little bit twisted as well, but there's something deeper behind it. But the point is, the moon is not the original reference point. Of course, there's a lot of evidence suggesting that the moon is not a real satellite. It's not a natural satellite. It's a construct that's been put in place there. It happens to have a perfect shape that, during eclipses covers the sun perfectly. So it's like it's a lot of coincidences here, but that's just one of the arguments. But the point is, the moon, right? Women know the moon for phases, that it has different phases. But what we don't know is that it was Venus that had phases, and she has phases originally. She shows up as a morning star, as the evening star. She shows up in her sort of highest, brightest, and sometimes she doesn't show up at all because she's invisible, like the moon. The new moon is invisible. There is a full moon. There are phases to the moon. But that mimics Venus. The original sort of reference for all that for women was Venus, because Venus is linked to the feminine alchemy. She's linked to the feminine essence, and it's Venus and what Venus does for women specifically, because she's holding certain feminine essence. That is not some kind of esoteric language here. This is based on Sumerian tablets, that Venus was created as the essence of that feminine creative force. So when we see her in the sky, she's still broadcasting to us certain codes that are affecting women specifically, because they awaken certain energies. They sort of sounds a bit new agey, but the point is that that connection with women from Venus is precisely what's responsible for a woman stepping into her alchemy. It's back in Eastern Europe and maybe in Greece as well. I don't know how is it for you guys, but probably even now, isn't it? In villages, like in really kind of rural places, at least in Eastern Europe, women would still wear a scarf on the hair. Older women usually.
Yeah. I think they still do to some degree.
Yeah, probably. And the same in Poland. So the grandmas, the kind of old ladies, they wear a scarf on the hair. And this is not because they have thinning hair. This is not because they are modest or anything. This is alchemical practice to do with women knowing that they are catching the energy of the stars, of the sun, of Venus into their hair. And then they put the scarf so that they kind of contain this energy, so that they keep this energy. And then, some of the stories in Poland say that when a woman, after she would have collected all this energy, when she took off that scarf and she kind of started to flutter it, like stars, like literally stars, like light was kind of coming from it. It was that energy, that kind of collected energy that they would have kept. So it had nothing to do. This is not like the Muslim kind of scarf covering women to do with that. It was totally different purpose, and it's still cultivated. So the sort of three reference points, Venus, Sun, and the stars at night, giving women sort of certain type of energies that women would very often catch into the hair. And this is why you also see a lot of women in older cultures that are braiding the hair, right? So they would sort of create you know what I mean, right? With the plait or a braid, which is specifically for this is the reference to the DNA. So those energies are these women are sending signals that they are aware of these sort of connections, that these energies are specifically activating the DNA. So a woman who, very often women, even until now in the folklore in Poland, in Russia, in a lot of Eastern Europe, you will see women, especially if they have those sort of folklore costumes, they will also have the hair done in two or one braid. It would be braided as a symbol of the connection with that energy that activates the DNA. So of course these women are not, physics teachers or biology teachers. This is just a symbolic representation. These women would have been initiated into this knowledge, from mother to daughter, grandmother, etc. And it would be passed down more as a tradition rather than science. But that was one of the kind of signaling ways.
Interesting. Ola, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
No, I really enjoyed the conversation, even when it got a little dicey or heated. I live for that sometimes. What the majority of our audience is female, actually, not like 90%, but more females than males. So what advice or what final words do you have for the listeners that are women? And also, please share how they can be supported by you or learn more about you and your work.
Absolutely. So I think I would say, first of all, that there is nobody that can teach you anything. There's nobody that should be guiding you, especially for women. A woman needs to sort of feel this as a deep knowing inside of her, and I think a lot of that literally can happen. The last 10 minutes of our conversation, please go outside and have a meaningful time out there, and perhaps if you feel guided, start doing the kind of things that we talked about, including, if possible, if at all possible. I feel a woman, it's really good if a woman can plant something of her own, perhaps something, some kind of food, something. And I'm gonna tell you why. It's not just so that she can have the fruits of it. It's literally because women, we are the creators. So it's almost like you're activating this connection with the earth and the fertility. It's about the fertility. It's about running your own fertility, which goes way beyond planting a garden. It goes, it's about birthing certain things into your life. So the more you can tend to that garden, and you can literally pour yourself into that garden on many levels, right, including what we've discussed, the more of that is going to be flowing into your life. So this is about flowing, the horn of plenty, right, which is of course in a woman the fallopian tubes, horn of plenty, connected to the the sort of egg of life, right, which is the ovaries. So that's one of the ideas for women. I would, if anybody wants to learn a little bit more, including perhaps a little bit more on that logical aspect, why does that work, and not just the diving into the alchemy, I recommend having a look perhaps at my website, where I try to explain it all. I have some webinars that are absolutely dealing with all these topics, but fully exhausting them, because there's only so much we can do in 2 hours. So you can also have a look there. I developed some discipline lately to organize my interviews into my own YouTube channel, so that you guys don't have to go looking after my name all over YouTube. So you may as well, of course, have access to some free resources. And if somebody wants to reach out in person, please do that too. I also organize getaways, events here in the Arctic. Why? Because this place is absolutely special. There is a very primordial energy here. Stories go, legends go very far, and it's very powerful. So if you would like to experience that, I can promise you that masks will fall, illusions will break, and there will be a breakthrough moment for many people here. So please reach out for that as well. I would love to
Amazing.
host.
I can only imagine what it's like being up there. Like I it's it sounds magical.
Well, I honestly, I'm not from here, so I hope I'm quite objective, but I would say that, from the places that I visited across the world, some of them have this very spiritual kind of marketing around them. I honestly feel that here, specifically, I'm talking Lofoten area. You can look it up, Lofoten Islands, Lofoten area. I would say that this is probably one of the most, if not the most powerful place that I have ever been to.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. And it's so interesting. I know we talked about when we started, you said, oh, my story isn't that much. And then just seeing someone from Poland in the oil and gas world, engineer, and now ending up in north of Norway doing what you do is really fascinating and interesting and cool. So
maybe not the most common thing to do.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Everyone else, thanks for listening. And we'll see you guys next time. Take care. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to that episode. An interesting conversation, for sure. And I guess for those that know us and are familiar with our work, the personal philosophy which you choose to adopt for your life matters so much. And I guess personally, it's my personal opinion that a great life can be lived, that you can wake up each day, face reality, and feel good about yourself, feel good about the life that you're living, feel good about what you're creating. And that is a core part of our mission and what we're trying to share with the world, and I guess with our audience here. So if you're looking at diving a little bit deeper, every single Friday, Yerasimos and I are sharing articles on topics that we think really matter to us, diving deep into personal interests, exploring different ideas, etc. So if you're down, you can join that by heading to hereforthetruth.com/Friday. And by getting on that list in the very near future, we're going to be launching the 7-day self-esteem reset, which for a very limited time will be available as a free offer. And this is basically just guiding you towards the core understanding of what self-esteem is and the importance of its role in your life.